Mushrooms, mushrooms, mushrooms. I mean, I sell so many mushrooms at work. People love them. They love them in chicken. They love them on a steak, as a side, on a pizza. They're fantastic. And there's so many different types of mushrooms too. Do you cook mushrooms at home? Now, if you do they look like this or do they look like this? Well, in this video, we're gonna go through my favorite way to cook mushrooms. We're also gonna go through how not to cook mushrooms. As we go along, there's gonna be tips and tricks and little pointers along the way to make sure you have a beautiful, perfectly caramelized mushroom side or dish at home. Now, if we're meeting for the first time, my name's Michael Ponzio and I make cooking videos for you. So the first question I get asked all the time about mushrooms is, do you wash mushrooms? And the answer is yes. You know, in a perfect world, you get them from somewhere that washes them ahead of time because they have the proper washing tools, but it's produce, it's a vegetable, so you do want to wash it. And also you can see all the little, you know, sometimes there's dirt on there, old spores, things like that. So a quick little wash is really good for the mushrooms, but there's a way to do it. There's a very important step we're going to take to do this to make sure that you're not losing the integrity of the mushroom, but you are cleaning all this stuff off. So to wash our mushrooms, we want to get a bowl of lukewarm water. We don't want it to be too hot because we don't want to start cooking these mushrooms, but it's got to be a little bit warm so that it can knock all this dirt and stuff off. The other thing I like to use is a colander. And the reason I like to use a colander is once we put the mushrooms in there, it'll keep them all together, but we could pull them out quickly. So to wash our mushrooms, we're going to place these in the lukewarm water and move them around quickly. This is only a few second process. So what that's going to do is knock a lot of that junk off while still preserving the integrity of the mushroom. But the minute they come out of the water, you want to get them on a container with a paper towel. And now you could see there's a lot of dirt and things left in the water. So it's a good thing we got rid of that. The other important note when it comes to washing mushrooms is you don't want to wash them ahead of time. You want to wash them right before you're about to cook them because they're going to take on water. And if that water sits, it's going to cause your mushrooms to become a little bit soggy and take on even more water. These things are like a sponge. So if you do this too far in advance and don't dry them properly, you're not going to have a good mushroom to cook. Now I'm just going to discard this water because there's really nothing we can do with just dirty mushroom water. Now our mushrooms are nice and dry and it's a beautiful, clean mushroom. And that's important because now that it's clean, we have less to worry about and we don't have to worry about getting a little grit in our teeth from the mushrooms or anything like that. To cook these, there's a few different ways we can do this. And I'm going to show you the right way to cook them and the wrong way to cook them. We're going to start by slicing these in half. I like to cut the mushrooms because this open area is going to allow more steam and more moisture to escape. That's going to allow for better caramelization on the mushrooms. Now, if you have a little bit woody of a stem, just knock that piece right off before you slice it in half. So here's by far the biggest mistake people make when they're cooking mushrooms is they just throw it all in the pan and expect it to cook. You're not going to get proper caramelization that way. What happens is people will put their oil in, not let their oil heat up, and then just take a mountain of mushrooms and throw it into the pan. Here's what's happening when this happens. These mushrooms are all stacked on top of each other, so they're not going to caramelize. What's going to happen is the mushrooms are going to give off all this water and steam and start to actually steam the mushrooms that are on the top and create more steam steaming the ones that are on the bottom. So you might get a little color, but you won't get that caramelization. You won't get that crunchy mushroom, caramelized mushroom texture that you're looking for. So what's going to happen is these are going to, like I said, cook and steam. You're going to see all this steam coming up. The other mistake that people make, and I'm going to do it in this one because I want you to see it, is they season their mushrooms way too early in the very beginning. What's going to happen is salt is going to pull more water out of these mushrooms. So what does that mean? That means that more water is going in the pan, creating more steam. Now, when I'm talking about all that moisture, you can see all this steam happening right now. You can also see all the water that's in the pan. This is the water that's being pulled from the mushrooms. So our first batch of how not to cook mushrooms is done, and you can see with these mushrooms, they have kind of just a gray color. There's no caramelization. There's liquid at the bottom of the pan, a lot of juices. There's no difference in textures, and they've shrunk quite a bit. So this is really not the preferred way to do it. Now let me show you the way that we cook mushrooms, the way that I absolutely love them, and what I think is the best way to cook them. So it all starts with preheating your pan. Once your pan is hot, you want just enough oil to coat the bottom of the pan. We don't want these swimming in oil. We want to make sure that there's enough though so that the mushrooms don't stick and fall apart, but we're going to add more fat throughout the cooking process. Once our oil is hot, we're going to add our mushrooms. The big difference here is you want to make sure you don't overcrowd the pan. you want to leave enough room so that the steam can escape without it affecting the other mushrooms. So the first thing you'll immediately notice is that there is steam coming up, just as much steam. But if I move these mushrooms around, you'll be able to see they're already starting to gain a little bit of color. And you'll be able to see a difference texturally happening as well. Now I still haven't seasoned yet. It's not time to season just yet. What we are going to do, because these mushrooms have absorbed a lot of that oil at the bottom of the pan, we're going to add a pat of butter. Now the butter is going to add some additional lubrication to the pan, but it's also going to add those milk fats that are going to toast and bring a nuttiness out in the mushrooms. We want to move these guys around, and you'll see now, I mean, they are browning and caramelizing beautifully, especially on the edge that we cut already. And because this pan's not overcrowded, they're not steaming on top of each other. They're caramelizing, their natural sugars are coming out, their textures are changing. The biggest difference you're going to see in this cooking process is the mushrooms are still releasing water, because that's what they do. They have so much water inside them naturally. But what's happening is that water has all this surface area now to turn into steam and escape. Whereas before, the water was turning into steam, but then it was going right back into the mushrooms. And the biggest thing about cooking mushrooms, if you want to make sure you get that nice golden brown color, you got to be patient with them. You don't want to move them around too much. You want to give the mushrooms time so that they can make contact with the bottom of the pan and start to caramelize properly. I still haven't added salt yet, but at this point, now that I've got some color on the mushrooms, they're looking great, the amount of steam coming up has slowed down, I'm going to add my salt. And the salt's not going to pull out as much water out of these mushrooms because we've already taken so much out of it in the initial cooking. Now these mushrooms are done, they're ready to go. They're caramelized, they have beautiful, beautiful texture to them, they're well seasoned. But let's take a look at the two mushrooms side by side to see the big difference. So you can see why I like this method much more than the first one. So the first mushrooms are the one from the initial crowded pan. And you can see there's a ton of juice left over in this saute pan. And the mushrooms look very soggy and grayed out. They're not very attractive in appearance. Now the second bunch of mushrooms, the one I like much more, the pan is pretty much dry. The mushrooms have a beautiful, beautiful golden brown color. They have different textures and they're going to taste completely different. So like I said, two completely different mushrooms in the end. One is very juicy and steamed and just doesn't bring a lot to the table. It's more of just a soggy mush in your mouth. Whereas the second one, the other ones, they're a little bit sticky and caramelized and have some really great textures, an earthy flavor and a nutty aroma. Absolutely brings out the best in the mushrooms doing it like this. And this isn't just with button mushrooms. If you're doing trumpet royale mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms, oysters, hanshamishi, hen of the woods, lobster mushroom, doesn't matter. I use the same method for all of them, honestly. The not crowded pan, starting with a little fat, adding more fat as you go, seasoning later. These are the very basics of mushroom cooking, and to me, kind of the most important thing about it. So as you can see by how I cook mushrooms, I'm a pretty fun guy. Just kidding, mushroom joke, not funny. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, comments, leave them down below. I will link everything in the description down below, everything I use, all the tips and pointers, the steps for the mushrooms, timeline snaps, so you can jump ahead. If you like what you see, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, click the little bell for notifications, because there's a lot of content coming out. And the more that people subscribe, the more content I can create. So thank you again. And if you like cooking and you want more techniques, check out this video on how to cook scallops. Check out my 10 tips for cooking steaks. And I'll see you soon. Take care.